But there's no excuse for trying to fight his army. You cannot beat his army with your army. It is impossible. So that's why mass marining players make so many medevacs, is it gives them the option of saying, well, I can't win this fight, I will just not fight it. I will go away. So that was pretty darn horrible. You lost twice as much as him, and no surprise there. Uh, this, I feel like this is silly. If you're going to make Blue Flame Hellions, that's $300 investment. You got to immediately get a dropship as well, and you got to drop them, you got to use them. Because Blue Flame Hellions, just as your part of your army, are quite bad. They do really well at being dropped on people. So, yeah, I would either recommend not getting them or using them. But you can't get them and not use them, because that's a ton of money committed to something you're just not going to use. I know you mentioned in your email that you're liking the synergy between Banshees and Blue Flame Hellions, and that's cool, because the Blue Flame Hellions kill the Marines, and then the Banshees kill everything else. I get it. I get that you like that. But the counter to that is one Marauder or one tank. You know, the Blue Flame Hellions can't do anything. And a couple of Vikings, too. I mean, in order to rely on air to do a lot of damage, you have to have more air than your opponent. You can't get out-Vikinged and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, looking at this sort of stuff within this game, the context of this game is silly because this game was over long ago. Saturation, you're not fully saturated yet, but you're doing a good job of splitting half and half between those two bases. That's cool. Anyway, this game is over. He's going to come, and this is the most beautiful assist thing ever, right? Splat! I splatter your... Like, just look how fast stuff dies to mass tank. It's crazy. So I would point you at some Marine King games to get an example of how you want to play if you're going to make a lot of Marines in TvT. But since I don't have any, I will just show you one of my games. La 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 la. So, one of the things I say every time I do an M&M game in TvT is that you have to understand that you will lose if your opponent just makes a bunch of tanks. And that is what you were seeing in your game, and I agree. There's nothing you could have done with M&M to beat tanks. So it's not your fault you lost in that build is countered by his build. But it is your fault you lost in that you picked a build that has such an easy counter. And then continued with it after you saw that he was doing the counter. Like, after you saw 3 tanks at 7 minutes, you should have been like, wow, this guy is really emphasizing tanks. I gotta cut this out. I'm just gonna stop doing this build. So... La 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 la. I don't even know what I'm doing. I kind of forgot what's going on. Oh yeah, so he comes with some tanks, and I've got M&M. And in order to fight M&M against tanks, you can't just A-move into the tanks. Because, like I said, tanks have very low DPS per dollar. There's 35 damage divided by 3 seconds, or times 3 seconds. No, divided by 3 seconds. So they do about 12 DPS? Yeah, 12 DPS, and they cost almost $300. Whereas Marines do about 8 DPS, and they don't cost $300, man. That's the Marines do 8 versus their 12. That's 2/3 as much DPS, and they cost 1/6 as much money. So an equal amount of Marines versus siege tanks are going to be doing like 3 times the damage. So siege tanks are very low DPS, but what makes them really good is their splash. So you can counter siege tanks by irrelevanting the splash. So see how before I attack, I move a little group here, and a little group over here, a little group here, and a little group here, and then some guys in the back? Siege tanks in general are going to attack whoever's in front first, so you don't have to spend too much time spreading out the back, you just have to spread out the front. And then you come in with dudes. So see how I'm using the entire horizontal plane of battle? There's kind of a good splashable area right here. But if he hits this guy, it's not going to splash. If he hits this guy, it's going to splash a little. If he hits this guy, it's only going to splash a little bit. You never want to be fighting, like in your game, you kept having this much room and only using this much. You never want to fight within only half of the horizontal plane that's available to you. You always want to cover the whole thing. Really good spread is very important. So, this battle was army size. In this battle, oh, actually, especially after that part. Okay, right there. So in this battle, he had $2,000 and 750 gas versus my $1,000 and 100 gas. So he had more than double my army size. So that's how important spreading out is. I was able to win the battle only because siege tanks are terrible if they don't splash. So, yeah, units lost before the battle is 1,100 versus 500. And then after the battle is I lost like 1,100 and he lost like 1,600. So smaller army against bigger army, the only thing that made it win was that spread. And it's really subtle and it's hard to understand how this game is different from your game. I mean, both of us fought against siege tanks with Marines and Marauders, right? So why isn't Marines and Marauders good against siege tanks when it was in your game and then all of a sudden good when it's in my game? And the answer is much more Marauder heavy. First of all, I've got 1 reactor core, 2 reactor cores, and 2 tech labs, but 3 tech labs, but I'm emphasizing the Marauders over the Marines when I produce. So see how I'm not fully utilizing the reactor core dudes? It's because I've seen tanks coming from him, and I know that Marauders are the thing that I need against tanks. They're fatter, and so the splashes hit less. And also, it's just because of the spread. You just really got to spread your guys out across the entire horizontal plane of battle, and that's like the most important thing when fighting against siege tanks with infantry. The second most important thing to recognize, the next battle actually does a really great job of emphasizing this, is that if using this half of your area is really bad, and using this is twice as good, then using this and this is 4 times as good, maybe 5 times as good. So the more surface area you can get against him, it's like Zerglings. You know, Zerglings are great if they get us around, and they're bad if they don't. So I saw this army coming, and I'm taking my Marine Marauder and fighting against a heavy tank composition. So what do? I take about a third of my troops, put them up top, another group right here, and another group right here, and so I'm going to come in from multiple angles and hit this troop not from the front, because like I said, tanks, very low health per dollar. They're very fragile. Marines, much higher health per dollar. Marauders, much higher health per dollar. Marauders and Marines both have essentially 1 health per dollar, whereas tanks, 160 health, but they cost 270 bucks, so they have half of a health per dollar. They're half as healthy as the other units. So if you hit from multiple sides, he's going to put his tanking units up front in order to tank for his tanks, tank for the tanks. And then I'm going to come out with a good horizontal spread, right? I'm making sure that the arc is decent, and hit these tanks with nobody in front of them to absorb the damage. So all of his guys that want to absorb damage are out of position. So these are the types of things that they don't just help. It's not just, wow, that really helped. If you look at the units lost, in both cases he had a bigger army than me, and he ended with a much higher units lost than I did. And you have to do that every time. It's much harder to do Marine Marauder against tank than it is to do tank against Marine Marauder. So yeah, now the battle is just, I mean, the game is just kind of over. But again, even though my army is so much bigger than his, I can just move in. It's still important to get this entire horizontal spread. You don't want to be